It's awesome to see everyone here. I was actually involved with UCAP way back in the early days when it first started, and we had some pretty small groups. And it's amazing to see all of you here today and how far it's come over those years. So I am going to talk today about the concept of spirituality. And I know when we hear the word spirituality, we often will confuse that with what I call religiosity. And religion and spirituality often go very closely together, but they're not necessarily the same thing. And so we're going to talk about spirituality and really its place in recovery. I believe from my own personal experience and what I've seen working with so many individuals over the years, that spirituality, true spirituality, is really at the heart of effective recovery. And you'll notice, I love this definition. It says the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. And I think that's a great description of spirituality. And one of the ways that I see that really applied is in the title of my presentation. It's called You Are Not Your Brain. And when you hear that, how many find that a little bit confusing or unclear? You are not your brain. And when people hear that, often they'll say, well, if I'm not my brain, what am I? And I've had the opportunity to really bring this concept up in all kinds of groups. Some of them, I've done some work in the substance abuse community, individuals who are just getting out of jail or prison. And they can look pretty rough around the edges. But as I talk about this concept, you really see just about everyone resonate to it. And I like to talk about what I call the first law of science. Something that exists, that is, cannot be turned into nothing. And something that is in existence is always going to be in existence. So you can't make something out of nothing, and you can't turn something into nothing. Very basic law of physics. So if that's true, when your brain and my brain is 6 feet under the ground with worms crawling in it, you will continue on. And if that's the case, then what that tells me is that you are not your brain. So you have this basically 3-pound supercomputer between your ears, and it's this wonderful database of all the information that you've been gathering over your lifetime. But the great challenge with the brain, as magnificent as it is it only knows what it knows. It's a closed system. And one of the great challenges with addiction and recovery is that we as addicts, we often get so caught up in the dominance of the brain that we can't see our way clear to real recovery. And I'm going to talk a lot about that today. So you are not your brain. You are an eternal being that has always been and will always be. And so you're really a dual being. There's this brain that's between your ears, and then there is what I call the true or real you, the eternal you. And it's important as we look at this addiction and recovery to really learn the difference between those, between what I call it, being the brain, and you. And the ability to really develop this skill of standing back and observing the brain, watching it, rather than being pulled in and being directed or dominated by it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So the severely limited power of me versus the infinite power of we. It's a really important recovery concept. Most often in addiction, we who have struggled with that, we feel very isolated. We feel detached and cut off from those around us. We tend to go it alone because we're very afraid that if we divulge everything that we're struggling with, all of those dark and secret behaviors, that we'll be rejected. We'll never be accepted if anyone ever learns the real truth about us. And so we shut ourselves off and go into this place of isolation, which really shuts off our access to the true power of recovery. So I like to say in recovery, there is no me, there's only we. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I want to tell you real quick just a little bit about my story. So I grew up just outside Los Angeles in the pornography production capital of the world. It's a little place called the San Fernando Valley, California. And that's where I was raised. And so I was exposed very early to pornography, and I like to say that I was hooked from the very first exposure. And that exposure led to a path of addiction for me that lasted 30 years. And so I call it the roller coaster ride from hell. Overcoming and falling back and overcoming and falling back again and again, hundreds and hundreds of times over the years. And it actually brought me to the place where I came very close to taking my own life. I was so exhausted and so hopeless from the fight and the struggle. And by God's grace and a lot of miracles, I was introduced to a man who would become my dear mentor, a second father to me, Dr. Page Bailey. He was a world-renowned neuropsychologist. And he started to teach me about why I did the things that I did. Why did I give in to this outlet that allured me and yet repulsed me at the same time? Why did I seem to have no power over it when it would come to that moment of urge? And he really introduced me to the neuroscience behind this addiction. And when I started to understand that, it opened up this whole vista of hope for me, because I thought, wow, I'm not just broken, flawed, and just the worst loser on the planet. There is an explanation behind this. There's a logical reason as to why I get caught up in this. And that really opened the door for me to start to make progress. And so through his mentoring and tutoring and through a lot of years of trial and error, I finally got to the place where I could say I'm actually free of this, and have enjoyed that for many years. And so today I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've learned and those I've worked with, a lot of great colleagues, a lot of amazing clients. What really works to break out of this really stubborn addiction? What does it take? And so I'm going to share with you just a few of the tools that we've found are highly effective. We're going to take a look at those. So tapping into spiritual power, I want to share with you today 3 tools. And there's many, there are dozens that are really effective, but these are 3 that I would say are probably the foundation, the bedrock of recovery really falls within these 3 areas. And so let's take a look at them. So the first one I want to talk about is what we call the spiritual power of observation. And this is really the ability to learn how to stand back and observe your own thoughts, to think about your thinking, if you will, to start to realize that you are not your brain, that you are a separate individual, an eternal being that has the ability to watch that brain, to observe it, and not be pulled into its conjuring. And this ability to observe is an essential first step in recovery. Can I start to become aware of the kinds of thoughts that lead me to these outlets? Can I start to open up more to my emotions, to the deeper issues that underlie this? And we have to develop this awareness in order to really start to make progress. And so one of the things that I teach in this power of observation is to start to identify what I call the ego-brain tendencies. So we have this brain, and it has certain ways of behaving. Its number one priority is survival. And so as you and I start to feel some kind of stress, which can be many things, loneliness, boredom, fear, financial issues come up, relationship problems occur in our lives. And as that stress occurs, the brain goes into its survival mode and starts searching for a solution. What is going to take away this discomfort? How do I soothe this pain? And that's the brain's job, and it's very effective at it. And so it starts looking down its list out of its memory banks to see what has been the most reliable and powerful and immediate in my past behaviors. And if, like me, you're one who turned to that early on as a kid for those stressful situations, it's very likely that that is at or near the top of your list. And the brain will choose that every time as the place to soothe and escape and avoid. So we have to develop the ability to start to recognize that process. What do the patterns look like? What are the routines that I've allowed the brain to get into? And can I step back and start to observe it instead of being pulled into it immediately? And so one of the things that I do with my clients, and I've actually practiced this most days for years, is to start to look at what we call a daily personal inventory. And this really comes from 12-step. If you're familiar with the 12-step program, you'll see a thing where we start to take a look at character defects and character assets, as we call them. And so looking at this inventory, typically at the end of a day, is really effective as a way to step back from the brain and take a look at what's been going on. And so we get really good at identifying these ego-brain tendencies. And you'll see this big long list here. There are things like fear, jealousy, envy, procrastination, justification, rationalization. There's a whole list of these tendencies that the brain has to deal with life, to deal with things that are uncomfortable, stressful. And so I'll go to these tendencies or places in order to soothe or escape or avoid. So part of this process of awareness, of standing back and observing, is starting to notice on a daily basis when these tendencies are manifesting. And you develop the skill of doing so. You'll start to feel a certain way and think, wow, I'm actually driving on the freeway. This guy's next to me in a Ferrari, and I'm feeling some deep envy here. I can notice that. I can see what that feels like. Or someone just said something to me that was offensive, and you know what, I'm really feeling resentment. Or it might be that you're just having a day where you're just mad. I've got a lot of anger going on. And so you start to become really an expert on your own emotions. Addiction is just a symptom. And it really gathers all of our attention. If I can just stop acting out these behaviors, I think I'll be okay. The problem with that approach is that there is always underlying deep issues below the addiction. Why am I escaping and avoiding in the first place? What really underlies this? And can I start to identify what those things are? And get to the place, really importantly, where I can start to identify them early as possible. The very first feelings that start to rise and bubble up, can I see them? And can I recognize them? And if I stay in that space, I know where they will lead me. And so this observation is a really powerful tool. Now you notice on the right-hand side of that chart, there are what we call eternal self attributes. What are the attributes of the real me, the true me? And you'll see things there like patience and love and peace and all of these different assets that are also a natural part of who you and I are. So just as we have ego-brain tendencies, we also have these positive attributes as well. And it's very, very helpful, not just helpful, but very important to start to recognize what those are on a daily basis. As addicts, we will always tend to go to the negative. Take anyone who's in recovery and ask them, so tell me what you've been doing today. How are you feeling? What's been going on? And usually the comments will tend towards the negative. We have a hard time in addiction recognizing the good things about ourselves, the positive attributes. And so it's important to track both. But this personal inventory has been a great way to help individuals get into the place of observing what's going on inside my own head and stepping back from it and being able to analyze it and look at it and recognize it. So I recommend this little tool to anyone, not just those who have addiction, but if you're trying to overcome any kind of behavior, this is a great simple tool to start to get to the basis of that behavior. What underlies it? What's at the deep root? This is a wonderful awareness tool and what I call a spiritual tool of observation to help you do that. So, great little tool as part of that. Next is what we call the spiritual power of surrender. Now, when I first heard this term years ago, it was very perplexing to me. In fact, it took me many years to get my arms around it at all. So when I heard it, I said, wait a second, let me get this straight. You're saying that in order to win against this addiction, I have to surrender. And I remember just thinking, are you people nuts? You mean wave the white flag, curl up in the fetal position, give up? No, I was taught you fight. You battle with these unwanted thoughts and urges. You go to war with them. The problem with that approach is that you and I have a limited amount of resources in the brain. Think of the brain as having a willpower fuel tank. And that tank only has so much reserve in it. There's been some wonderful research out of Florida State University. Roy Baumeister and his team have done some studies on willpower in the human brain. And what they've discovered is that if we have a particularly stressful morning, for example, and we're using our willpower to deal with stressful people and issues, to control our thoughts, and we really start drawing upon that willpower fuel, by the time the afternoon comes, our willpower tank will be empty. And then we have no control whatsoever over our urges when the afternoon comes. So how many of you have noticed, for example, you have a stressful morning, and by the time the afternoon comes, you're absolutely consuming junk food, right? Chocolate in particular. And you seem to have no ability to say no. And there is a logical neuroscience explanation behind that. If I use up those willpower reserves, then I have virtually no ability to choose. Now, this is an especially difficult challenge for those of us who suffer with addiction. Not only are we dealing with all the regular stresses of life, but we're also fighting our addiction at the same time, fighting those thoughts and those unwanted urges and images. So by the time our early afternoon comes around, our willpower tank has been drained long ago. And so now we find it very difficult to resist going to that brain's favorite place of self-soothing and medication because our willpower is gone. People will often say, why don't you just say no? Just don't do it. Just choose a different option. And the challenge with that is when we try to choose a different option, we basically have no willpower left. So willpower is not the answer to recovery. White knuckling, going to war, doing battle, it just leaves us exhausted, it leaves us hopeless, and it leaves us searching then for that favorite outlet to find the relief from the battle. So if willpower isn't the answer, what is? Well, it's this concept of surrender. And it took me a long time to get this, but when I finally got it, I remember when finally the information got through. And I thought, wow. So for 20 plus years, I've been relying on my own power, my own energy, my own resistance, my own ability to do battle with this. And I've been ignoring and shutting myself off from all the other resources all around me that could have and should have been assisting me in this effort. But I closed myself off because I thought it was all up to me. And so the process of surrender means, and it's really the first 3 steps of the 12 steps, and I love the steps. We often say it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. So step 1 says, I come to realize that I'm powerless over this addiction. Everything I've tried fails. I can't do this alone. Therefore, step 2 says, I therefore must start looking for something outside of me to be able to find the answer. And 3 is, when I find what that is outside of me, then I'm going to give my will and my way over to whatever that is. Those are the first 3 steps. That's surrender, surrendering my way for access to this infinite amount of power and resources that I can now draw upon. But as addicts, we feel like I've got to do it myself first. If I can prove myself first with so many days or weeks or months of sobriety, then I'll reach out to all of these resources around me. But I have to prove it myself first. And of course, that continues to fail as we end up in this willpower and failure cycle. So the power of surrender, let me give you a 5-step process that's been wonderfully effective. I've used it for years. I've worked with clients who have some of the most severe addictions you can imagine. And as they start to embrace this surrender process, you see this wonderful unfolding begin, where they start to enjoy greater lengths of sobriety. They start to put forth less effort. It's not so hard anymore. It becomes easier. It becomes much more simple. And this process has been really effective in that. So let me show you these steps. So first is you have to be aware. You have to realize and stand back and look at that brain and its thoughts and its urges. And so this observation is a critical first step. If I'm not aware of what I'm thinking, if I can't step back and become a watcher of this brain, then I can't work this process of surrender. So we start to get good at saying, ooh, I can see that thought or that urge, that image. There it is. Let me stand back for a minute and look at that instead of just immediately reacting to it. So be aware is the first one. Secondly is you have to learn to stand your ground. The brain is a tyrant. And once it develops habits and patterns, it doesn't like to give those up. In fact, I say once a habit's in place, your brain builds this 30-foot high razor-wired electrocuted fence with this big sign that says, keep out, already established. Because the brain expends great amounts of energy to build its habits. It's not easy. It takes hundreds or really thousands of repetitions to get a habit in place. And once it's there, the brain says, leave this alone. This is efficient. I've worked hard to build this. Don't disturb it. So in order to really get out of that habit, you have to stand your ground. And so what I do as part of this process, I'll often take my hand, in fact, take your left or your right hand and just put it right here on your chest over your heart. Just touch your hand to your heart. Can you feel a shift as you do that? There's a shift from this head-based approach to really what I call the spiritual center of us. And so I often have to take this hand and put it right there so that I can remind myself to go to my spiritual center and not let this brain dictate. So as you put your hand here, now you go into the place where you say, you know what, I'm going to look at these thoughts. I see that they're there, but now I'm going to stand my ground. And I like to think of my mind as a stage. And there are certain actors that are trying to come onto that stage. And I have to stand back and watch and look, who's trying to gain access to the stage of my mind? And if those players are not in harmony with my values, my desires, my recovery, where I'm trying to go, then it's up to me to stop them right there at the side curtain. You don't get to be here. I see you trying to gain access onto this stage. Stop right there. Go no further. And sometimes I have to get kind of angry, right? This is the stage of my mind, and you don't get to play here. So stop right there. And my wife will tell you that sometimes she'll hear me in the house kind of ranting that way, where I'm talking, to my brain and telling it who's in charge. Those players aren't allowed here. Stop right there. So this concept of standing your ground is so important. You have to be forceful about it. You have to, just as the brain is a tyrant in what it does, you have to become a tyrant in the defense of yourself against that ego brain and all of its conjuring and its patterns and its habits. And so you stand your ground as forcefully as you need to in order to pause and keep those thoughts at bay. So once you've done that, then the next step is you need to surrender the way that ego brain is trying to do things. So I'm in a stressful situation. My brain searches its little list of remedies, and based on my past, my patterns, my habits, it says, oh, I know exactly what the solution is in this moment. I know how to soothe and to medicate and escape. And so I want to go look at pornography. And when it starts conjuring that up, that's when I have to step in and intervene for myself as my true self and say, you know what? We're not going there. That option is off the table. And I will actually kind of do this motion where I will reach up with my arms and I'll say, God, I'm giving this over to you. Here it is, off the table, done. It's now in your hands. So if I've done that, now I'm kind of there as an empty vacuum. My brain still has a need, doesn't it? It's still feeling stressed. It's still feeling some kind of crisis. It's looking for an outlet. So if I just take that one off the table and don't do anything else, what's going to happen? That brain is going to start pushing on me again and pushing to go to its favorite outlet. So the next step is, once I surrender up the brain's way, now I'm going to ask. And this is really where the power of spirituality comes into recovery. So whatever your higher power is for you, for some of you it's God, for some of you it's Jesus Christ, some of you it's this power of the universe, it's energy, whatever it is for you, whatever that outside source is, in that moment that you've taken that habitual option off the table, you're going to now ask, what do I need in this moment? In this moment of crisis or boredom or loneliness or stress or fear, what do I need most? And as you ask that question, you pause and you just be quiet. And again, I'll have to put my hand on my heart and I'll just pause and listen. And I promise you, I have tested this for so many years with myself and so many in recovery. It doesn't matter about your belief system. It doesn't matter if you happen to have kind of a resentful experience with religion or a God. If you just simply tap into this higher source, you will feel ideas come. You will have impressions. They will occur to you. And I often ask those suffering with addiction, can you think of a time when you were highly tempted and you had that urge just beating on you to go to your addiction, and you had an idea come into your mind of what you should do in that moment, but you didn't follow it, and you went ahead and gave in to the addiction urge? Every person I work with could sit and tell you about all of those experiences when the ideas and promptings came and they didn't follow through. So this source is real, it's there, and you and I can tap into it in this moment. This is where we have the isolated me trying to battle out my recovery, and now surrendering that and opening myself to this infinite source of knowledge and wisdom and power in the moment. Those ideas will come. And it could be one of 1,000 things. I'll often tell clients, you know what? You might get an idea that says, wow, I know that I have that chocolate fudge Dove bar in my freezer. I think I need to go eat it. That's what's occurring to me in this moment. And that might be exactly what you need right then. It could be reaching out to someone. It could be making a call, sending a text. It could be putting on some inspirational music. It could be praying. It could be any number of so many things. But the beauty of that infinite source is that it or he knows what you need in that instant. And it will be given you if you will ask. So that asking part is so important, to get that guidance, that inspiration, that information that's outside of my own brain. My brain only knows what it knows. It's a closed system, and it will seek for what it has always sought for. So if I'm going to break out of that, I have to tap into information that's not in my head. It's outside of me. And listen to what that is. So once that impression comes, and it will, this next part is critical. And this is where I see all of us who struggle often tripping up with this process, and that is, you act on it now. Right now. Because what's going to happen is that little ego brain is going to come up with all kinds of excuses and reasons why you can't do that. Really? That's what I need? That just doesn't make sense to me. Or, I don't have time for that right now. That's not going to work. You know what? I'll do that later. That ego brain will come up with more excuses than you can imagine. All the reasons why you shouldn't follow through with the impression that you're receiving. Now, why does the brain do that? The reason it does that is because it's trying to retake control. It's trying to steal back the stage of the mind. It has what it insists is the right answer in that moment. And it's going to do everything it can to follow through and to get that outlet. It doesn't want you to act on this other impression that you've received. No, I know what I need right now. I need pornography. I need this sexual outlet. This is what I need. And you're actually standing up to that and saying, no, I'm getting a different impression. And I'm going to follow through with that. You're going to get resistance. And you have to be strong, and you have to stand your ground and follow through with the impression that you're receiving. So that's the 5-step process. I've seen it work over and over again, even with the most stubborn, long-term addictions. It's amazing how this begins to make breakthroughs. Because now, instead of battling, clenching my fists and gritting my teeth and going to war with these unwanted urges, now I just simply surrender, doing it my way, doing it the brain's way, and I open myself to this wonderful source of power and information and wisdom, and then I just follow through when it comes. There's such an ease to it. The warfare of battling with addiction starts to dissipate, and now this ease of recovery. I didn't say easy, but it isn't ease. It's this smooth path that opens up as I stop making it all about me and I start embracing the we of recovery. So I highly recommend that 5-step surrender process for any behavior that you're trying to overcome. It works. So the third tool is what I call the spiritual power of connection. A lot of people believe, well, I'm often asked, Marks, what is the opposite of addiction? And a lot of people automatically say, well, it's sobriety. It's being sober. Say, no, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Addiction is an intimacy disorder. It's where we close ourselves and shut ourselves off, not only from our own feelings and emotions, but also from those around us. We go into this state of isolation. And so one of the great remedies for addiction is to now engage in this process, so I like to call it an art of connection. And so how do you do that? So intimacy, if you look at the word intimacy, I've asked this in lots of groups. Sometimes I'll do really weird things like go up to a person on the street and say, hey, when you hear the word intimacy, what do you think of? What do you think almost all people say to me? Sex. That's the response I most often receive is, well, yeah, intimacy, sex. And that's one of the great evidences of why we have such a tough time with this in our culture. Sex is a small part, or I should say can be a small part of intimacy. I can engage in sexual activity and not be intimate. Intimacy is a deep connection. It's coming together with another human being to share understanding and empathy, to share honesty and vulnerability. And that's just the opposite of where we go with addiction. We shut off, we isolate, we bury feelings, we're dishonest. As addicts, we lie. We tell lots of lies, not because we are necessarily immoral or dishonest people at our core. We lie because of fear. We're afraid that if I tell the truth, no one will ever see me the same again. They'll look at me with a jaundiced eye from now on if they know my deep, dark secrets. And so we shut ourselves off because of that fear. As part of recovery, we've got to let go of that fear and engage in intimacy. Into me, you see. I'm going to just open myself up. Everyone take your arms and go like this. Open yourself up. How does that feel? Some of you are saying, wow, that feels awesome. Some of us in recovery going, ooh, really? That's kind of vulnerable, right? But you look at that posture, right? I'm exposed. All of my vital organs are right there. I'm open. And this is really what we have to look at with regard to connection and recovery. I need to start risking telling the truth, risking being vulnerable. And how does the ego brain respond to vulnerability? Oh, it doesn't like it. It's like, are you kidding me? You're going to start to divulge all these things? Right? We don't air our dirty laundry. We don't talk about the skeletons in our closet. You keep them hidden. You put on masks. You put on an act. You got to have a facade. You have to control the way people see you. Because if you let them see the real you, they're not going to accept you. They're going to reject you. This is one of the hardest parts of recovery, is to start to become vulnerable, to start to share, to start to open up. And the place where it begins is it begins with the individual. So I have to start to develop this level of self-intimacy. I have a lot of guys that I work with, and I was in this place for decades. How many men here in this room feel like you're well in tune? It's dialed in connection with your inner feelings. Please raise your hands. A couple guys in the back are like this. So we have a hard time with feelings, especially as men. The joke is, well, Mark, there's only 3. I mean, you're either mad, sad, or you're glad. What else is there? And we have this tough time getting down to what are these feelings I'm having. I didn't even know that I had feelings. What do you mean feelings? What are you talking about? What is that? And I had to be coached and guided through the process of even recognizing that I had them. What are they? What do they look like? What do they act like? How do you identify them? I have this little, you've probably seen the little charts. I have a chart on my wall in my clinic where it shows all the facial expressions for the feelings. Here's what anger looks like with a little emoticon face. Sometimes my guys have to walk up to the chart and go, oh yeah, resentment. I think that's the one. So we have to start to become self-intimate and be willing to start to dig down below the surface and see what's there. Learn. We have to learn the skill of feeling. It doesn't come natural to many of us because we've become so good at pressing and tucking those things away. The last thing we want is to feel. It hurts. It's painful. It's risky. And yet, if we can't develop that self-intimacy, we're going to stay stuck. So into me, I see. I begin to see into myself. Then once we're getting pretty good at that, we can start to reach out and let others see into us. Into me, you see. I'm going to become brutally honest. I'm going to start to tell the truth, regardless of the risks. I'm going to start to trust that my higher power, my higher source, that God has my back. And I'm going to be honest, regardless of the consequences. He's got me. That honesty is essential because until I'm willing to do that, I can't reach out for the help that I need. I have clients sometimes who will divulge only parts of their addiction. I did that for years, decades. Yep, I'm going to go confess. So I'm going to tell you this and this, but man, I'm never going to tell you that one. Because if I tell you that one, you will never see me the same again. You could never love me if I really let you know that deep, dark stuff. So I'll just give you some partial disclosures. And how does that bind and handcuff those around us trying to help us when we don't give them the full story? They don't know about all the issues that are going on, so they can't help us effectively. So getting to this place of being honest and vulnerable, risking it, is one of the greatest challenges. I find a wonderful place for that to begin is, for example, in some 12-step groups, where you're in a circle with others like you. And so you start sharing in that environment where it's safer. There's a high degree of confidentiality. What's talked about there stays there. So start to experiment on what it's like to be vulnerable and honest and open. And it's baby steps getting to that place. The last one on intimacy is I need to start to get to the place where I allow God or my higher power to see into me. Now that may sound like a contradiction. Well, doesn't God see everything? Well, yes, he does, and that's the irony of the whole thing with addiction. I'm not going to really be honest in God if I'm praying or having a conversation with him because there's certain things I just am not comfortable saying to him. Well, wait, he knows everything already. And so coming to this place where we can develop this God intimacy is also really important. And I find there's a lot of religious cultural issues that get in the way. I have some that, and I had this problem for many years. I want to pray really raw and vulnerable, and then I'd start to get tripped up on the right words that I was supposed to be using. Wait, is it thouest or thine or thee? I don't know what, did I do wouldest or would, or I don't know how to get that right. And it would just get in the way of having this really raw conversation with someone who loves me and accepts me without condition. So we may think that we're being intimate with God and with that spirituality, but what we're really doing too often, especially those of us in addiction, is we're being religious, but we're not really being spiritual and connecting. So that's also something to work on. I often tell guys, you know what? You need to fire the God that you have in your mind and hire a new one, the real one. So we go through this fire and hire process. And that's another thing that I recommend that you take a look at. So this intimacy and connection is everything. Into me, you see. Into me, I see. Into me, you see. And into me, he sees. And just breaking down all those masks and those barriers and the pretending and the duplicity, just let it all go. And it takes time. It's scary. How many here are scared by my description of vulnerability? See, there are some vulnerable people actually willing to raise their hand and say that scares me. It scares all of us to be an open book, to be totally transparent. Are you kidding? No, you have to put on the facade so that you can control what others think of you. I've got to control that impression. That is an automatic recipe for addiction when we do that. So, there is great hope. I thought for a good part of my life that I would never, ever be free of this addiction. After having failed thousands of times over decade after decade, I thought I will never be free of this. There's no hope. And it's so easy to get into that place. But I want to tell you that there is great hope. I often say if I can do it, then anyone can do it, because I was in a really deep, dark, and hopeless place. So the first thing to realize is that you are not your brain. These behaviors, these habits, these things that cause you to feel so low and disgusted with yourself, it's all part of the natural pattern of an ego. There's a logical explanation as to how it develops and how you get stuck in that place. But it's not you. You are a magnificent, eternal being that has always existed and will always exist. You are not this computer database between your ears. Yes, it has great influence on you. We often allow it to dominate us and to lead us around, but it's not us. And so there is this great hope that you can step back. You can observe it, you can watch it, you can learn how it works, and you can take charge and get into the driver's seat where it's no longer driving you, you are directing it. And there's great hope in that, in this wonderful concept of neuroplasticity. The brain is moldable, shapeable, it's changeable. And what we found in the research, it's not genetics that have the greatest impact on the brain, it's not even environment. What we now know clearly is the greatest impact on changing the physical structure of the human brain is choice. And it's marvelous to see the results of just moment-to-moment choice and the fact that it literally changes the physical makeup of my brain. Consistent choosing. Addiction is the proof of that. It was thousands of consistent choices over decades that built the addiction in my brain, the wiring. And if that's true, then I can use other choices repetitively, consistently, to build a different brain. You can't recover with the brain you have today. We have to help you build a new brain. And neuroplasticity says it's absolutely a fact that you can do that. Is that hopeful? That you're not just stuck in that place? And you are not alone. In addiction, we feel isolated, we feel alone, we feel like there's no one there for us, and it's illusion that the brain conjures up. There's people all around us. I thought disclosing my life would be ruined and done forever. Yet here I am telling you, front of this big giant audience, and you didn't mob me, you didn't lynch me. Nothing bad happened, at least that I'm not aware of. But it's okay, it works out. We have to trust. And so we're not alone. We have all these resources around us if we'll let go of that secrecy and just receive those things, those people. And I love to say, if we can do it, you can do it. There's a lot of individuals that are in this room that I've worked with that have had severe, stubborn addictions, decades long. Yet they're sitting here among you, and they're free today. They have normal lives. It's miraculous. It happens every day. It takes work. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work and a lot of courage and a lot of determination. I like to say it works if you work it, but it is absolutely possible. And Steve, my colleague Steve Moore, and I felt so strongly about this that we launched, you may have noticed, we launched our book at this conference called The Pornography Paradox. Why LDS men are too often trapped in pornography and sexual addiction, and how to break free. So we thought, you know what? We preach transparency. It's time for us to be transparent. And so in this book, we tell our raw stories, and we talk about all of the experiences through our recovery and the many men we've worked with, as raw and real and transparent and vulnerable as we knew how to make it. And it was uncomfortable, let me tell you. Sometimes we're looking at it, can you really say that? Are you going to say that? Yeah, I'm going to. So it's possible for all of us. I think I have about 5 minutes left. I want to open it up to any questions that you have. Questions, concerns, things you're wondering about? Yes? The printout of the presentation? Oh, the very first slide. I don't have a printout. I'll tell you what. If you want to email me, I'll send you a copy of it. So you ready? Here's my email address. It's M as in Mark, B as in boy, then Kastleman, my last name, Kastleman. So mbkastleman@gmail. So if you want a copy of the presentation, just email me and I'll send it to you. Other questions or comments? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great question. So the question is, well, what happens if I ask in that moment of surrender and the Dove bar impression comes to me, and now after that I develop a Dove bar addiction, and I keep going to that as my outlet. So I like to say that addiction has a hierarchy of priority. So the thing that is the most destructive in my life is where I need to start. So if it's pornography or sexual addiction, if it's heroin, if it's alcohol, I start there and I begin to replace that in that moment of surrender. If that replacement becomes an issue, now I need to practice surrender with it, with that replacement activity, and start to be open to other alternatives if that becomes a problem. Because with these ego brains, they're more than happy to replace that addiction. Oh, great, you're not going to go to that anymore? Well, let's bring this substitute in. Now that becomes my go-to place. So you just take it as a list of priorities. You can't do it all at once. As addicts, we're all or nothing. Yep, no more pornography, no more chocolate, right? I'm going to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning and exercise for 2 hours. I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And it's the old racehorse, flashy out of the gate, dead on the track, one lap around. So recovery is for the workhorses, the plodding, boring, plain-looking workhorses that just plod around the track and do the work. But you have to be careful of that because that ego brain will replace it really quick. So here comes the awareness. Here comes the surrender, right? Yes? Thank you for saying that. So she said, well, doesn't it take willpower as part of this process? And it does. And so I like to say it different. Rather than willpower, recovery takes an act of the will. And that act of the will is in that moment when that urge or pattern is coming to me. The ego brain wants to go the same place it's always gone, And that's when I stand my ground. And with an act of the will, I say, you will not come here. Stop. Now I surrender that option up. I open myself to impressions, and I act on those. But it starts with an act of the will. So there is a place for that will. You have to exercise it. It's just that we use that then as our total solution. And we keep using acts of the will. We don't surrender. We don't open ourselves to other information and guidance. We just resist, resist, resist. And that doesn't work because it exhausts us. But a quick, in-the-moment act of the will that's strong and powerful and forceful and determined is absolutely necessary. Does that make sense? Yeah, act of the will, not willpower. I think we're about done, aren't we? Yeah, great. Thank you so much. It's been great to be here with you.